Now, I live in a country that has one of the best watch industries in the entire world, and that country is Japan. In fact, Grand Seiko has one of their high-end workshops about an hour from my house. But one thing that I don't see a lot of out here are micro brands that are based in Japan. But today we're taking a look at a micro brand that's based here in Japan, and the watch that they're coming out with has one of the coolest designs that I've seen in a long time. And I feel like it draws its influences from Japanese design in a way that I don't see many watchmakers go for. Today we're checking out the Shirahama from NAMICA watches. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave, and like I said, I live here in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. And I get a lot of requests to review watches, more requests that I can actually keep up with, so I have to be kind of selective about which ones I pick. But when I saw the pictures of this watch and got to chatting a little bit with the founder of the company, and hearing that he was based here in Japan, I was really interested. There's just such an elegant minimalism in this watch, combined with some really bright colors that I think really draws a lot of clear inspiration from Japanese design, which is actually kind of unusual. I think most Japanese watchmakers, they kind of start with sort of a Western style and then sort of change it and adapt it from there. Whereas this watch is just going all in on the Japanese aesthetic. It's bright, it's fun, it's easy to wear, and yet it's also a really tough 200-meter fully functional dive watch. This watch is called the Shirahama. It's named after a beach in Izu. It basically means white sand beach. And this watch is going to be launched on Kickstarter coming up very shortly, and the brand sent over 3 watches for me to take a look at. Now, these watches are prototypes. There will be some changes before the production versions come out, and I've actually already shipped them back to the brand, so these were on loan. However, NAMICA did tell me that if the watch is successfully funded, they'll send me one of their production units after the campaign is over. And that's why you saw the paid promotions flag at the beginning of this video. However, other than that, I didn't receive any compensation for this video, nor did NAMICA have any input into the content of the review. There's 2 main versions of this watch. You have kind of the standard model and then what they call the Neo Tokyo model. The Neo Tokyo has a really strong kind of cyberpunk anime influence that looks really cool, along with just a really beautiful sort of purple brushed fume dial. So we'll take a look at both of those throughout the review. But first, let's talk about the dimensions and specifications that you're getting with this watch. I measured these watches at 40 millimeters at the bezel. The case itself is a little bit smaller at 39 millimeters. You get 20 millimeter lugs, about 14 millimeters thick, 46.7 millimeters lug to lug. Inside you have a Seiko NH38 movement and 200 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown. Now, since these are going to be Kickstarter launches, there's a variety of pricing. On Kickstarter, the standard model will start at $299 and go up to $349 depending on how quickly you're able to lock in your price. The Neo Tokyo will start at $339 and go up to $399. And then retail prices will jump up after that. So let's start by talking about the design of these watches, because that's the thing that really caught my eye. These watches feature a minimalist design with simple geometric shapes, but they are not boring by any means. They just have a really wonderful use of color, and the colors that they use in these watches are very bright, very vibrant. When you look at the standard model, the orange second hand is almost a neon orange, and it just goes so well with the contrasting blue and white bezel. I feel like a lot of times when watches go for minimalism, they kind of take too many things off of the dial, and you wind up with a watch that is very minimalist but might not be that legible. It might be missing markings that are actually really helpful or necessary for the watch to function properly. This watch manages to pack in all of the markings that you would need and yet still have an incredibly clean, distraction-free design on it. Part of that is due to the kind of muted look of the logo and the text. The one we're looking at here is a white dial watch with kind of a subtle gray color to the printing on it. So you almost don't even see the logo or the text that reads automatic underneath it. Particularly on the standard model, I love how they have outlined the markers in black. The second hand is also very interesting. It's a white second hand with the exception of the tip, which is black. So half of the second hand kind of really disappears against the dial, but the part that you need to actually read the watch stands out very starkly in a really clear black on white contrast. And they've done a great job with the bezel as well. This is a fully lume bezel that's kind of split in half, that's in 2 colors. On the standard version that I've got, it's a blue and white bezel. On the Neo Tokyo, it's a black and white bezel. So on the dark part of the bezel, on the blue part of the bezel, the numbers are lumed. The bottom half of the bezel has a fully lumed background, which allows the blue markings to contrast against it. And talking about lume, the lume on these watches is really fantastic, particularly on the standard version. The standard version has some of the brightest lume that I've ever tested. The Neo Tokyo version is a lot less bright just because of the way that they've applied the markers to give it kind of that outlined look, but it looks really cool in the dark, and it does still last a pretty good length of time. Going back to the bezel, the action on this is really good. It's got a nice, confident, tactile feel to it with no backplay. Let's jump over and look at the differences between the standard and the Neo Tokyo version. The Neo Tokyo version, again, they went with this kind of really cyberpunk sort of anime look. It uses the same basic design as the standard one, but with a different use of colors and textures. The main colors on this one are kind of black and purple, and rather than having applied markers, you have these painted outline markers that, again, just look great in the dark. It really does have this kind of cyberpunk, matrixy sort of feel to it. And with the Neo Tokyo version, you can opt for a black case if you like, or you can get in the standard silver. On the Neo Tokyo version, one of my favorite aspects of it is the dial. This is one of the most dynamic dials I've seen, and it is really unique. I haven't really seen anybody do a dial quite like this before. In the center, you have this very bright kind of purple that fades to a dark black on the edges. And the whole thing features a vertical brushing, which just gives it a really cool look. But what's really interesting is the way that it plays with the light. This is a watch that, depending on the angle that you hold it, the dial will often look completely black, and then other times the purple will just look like it's glowing. It'll just reflect the light back and have this shimmer and shine to it. Now, I think it's really easy to go wrong with a purple dial, but they managed to pull it off really well. This shade of purple doesn't look feminine to me at all. It just has this kind of really cool, aggressive look to it that is just a ton of fun. The case and bracelet on all of these watches has a matte finish. It looks like a kind of bead blasted look to it. So no brushing, no polishing. It's a finish that kind of absorbs light rather than reflects it. I think it leans into the minimalist aesthetic of it. And again, it just offers a really cool contrast between the really bright colors that they use on the dial and on the hands. It's a very simple finishing, but very effective. The case design mostly kind of disappears on the wrist. You have fairly compact lugs that kind of poke out from behind the bezel, but it's a very comfortable case design. It's a little bit unique and different than what you normally see on dive watches. And the bracelets articulate very well. They're very comfortable on the wrist. The clasps are fairly standard for what I see on micro brands in this price range, but they're very well done. You have an adequate number of micro adjusts, and they function very smoothly. Inside these watches, you're getting the Seiko NH38 movement, which is the no-date version of the Seiko NH35. And these watches do not feature a date on the dial, so it's always great to see a watch manufacturer match the appropriate movement with the kind of watch that they're building. Now let's talk a little bit about the lume on these watches, because that was something that really stood out to me, and I feel like lume is a big part of these watches. I mean, when you think about Japan and Tokyo in general, you think about the neon lights and you think about the nightlife there. And I think the way that they've done the lume on these watches kind of brings to mind that aspect of Japan. These are lumed with BGW9 and a very healthy application of it, especially on the bezels. The white half of the bezel is just completely loaded with BGW9. It glows very brightly and for a very long time. And I'm going to be focusing on the standard dial when we talk about the lume. They're still making some tweaks to the Neo Tokyo version. Right now it is significantly weaker than the standard version, and it will always be weaker than the standard version just because they're using painted markers instead of applied ones. But it should be a little bit stronger in the production model than the ones that I have in the prototype. But the standard model has one of the brightest applications of BGW9 that I've ever seen. On the initial J-score test that I did on this watch, it scored so high that I thought I must have made a mistake somehow in the testing. So I actually reran the test again against some of the most powerful lumed watches that I have in my collection. And well, the second time did reveal a slightly more reasonable result. It was still keeping pace with these other watches. Came out with a J-score of 16, which puts it up in like the top 3 or 4 watches that I've ever tested. And that means that it's about 60% brighter after 1 hour than a Seiko Samurai. So really impressive job with the lume that they've done on here. And really cool to see kind of that blue BGW9 glow coming in and lasting that long and remaining that bright. Speaking of lume, if you're interested in that and you want to pick up one of these cool Lume Shot t-shirts, they don't actually glow in the dark. They just kind of look like they do. I am selling them on my website at justthewatch.com. So you can head over there, pick one of these up and support the channel. Now, because this watch is launching on Kickstarter, I always like to talk a little bit about the brand behind it because there is a little bit of added risk when it comes to Kickstarter watches. When you back a watch on Kickstarter, you are helping to support the start of a new company, and there are risks and rewards in that. Now this is NAMICA's first Kickstarter campaign. The founder's name is Charlie. He actually was born in Taiwan but was raised in London. He met and married his Japanese wife and then moved back here to Japan. So that was kind of cool to me because my wife is also Japanese. I'm not from Japan originally, but I've moved here and kind of made this my home. Now Charlie's background is in graphic design and product design, and that's where I think it really shines through here. Again, the design on this watch is really a step above what I see in a lot of Kickstarter watches. A lot of the watches that are kickstarted are not kickstarted by designers, and that kind of shows through in some of the design choices. There's not quite as much polish as this watch has. But in this case, I think his graphic design background really helped him pull this one together. And while the brand is headquartered here in Japan, like most micro brand watches, the production will be done in Hong Kong and mainland China. As far as negatives go, I did have one problem with the standard version that they sent over. When I was adjusting the time on it once, I pulled the crown out and actually the entire crown pulled out of the watch, which was kind of scary, but I stuck it back in and screwed it back in, and after that it seemed to latch in good. Now again, these are prototypes. I let Charlie know about that, so he's going to be checking with his manufacturer to try and ensure that nothing like that happens in the production models, but I don't think I'd be doing a good review if I didn't mention it. Overall, I think these watches really do have a fresh and unique look, and you can really see Charlie's understanding and respect for Japanese culture and design. It's really infused into this watch, and it's kind of an interesting thing living here. You know, I come from America where there is such a high appreciation of Japanese culture, and you know that people want to incorporate Japanese design and Japanese culture into so many products. Well, interestingly enough, here in Japan, they kind of have that same feeling towards the West. Western culture has such a strong influence on Japanese products that oftentimes it feels like they start with a Western design and then they kind of take it and adopt it and tweak it and infuse their own Japanese sort of sense into it. And I feel like that holds true with watches as well. So it's really cool to see a watch that starts with sort of the Japanese design and pushes that to the front of it. Anyways, let me know what you guys think of this watch down below. Always love to talk with you. I'll put links to the Kickstarter campaign, and also I'll put a list of the changes that are being made to the prototypes in the description below if you want to check those out. Don't forget to check out my website, pick up one of the t-shirts if you're interested. But that will do it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye.